be seen, despite his cause for concern, must be seen to keep pushing Trump to adhere to those red lines. And whilst the world at large thinks that there is some kind of gulf between them, I assure you, Thomas, that the United States and Israel are both committed to seeing the downfall of this Iranian regime.
Okay, Peter, do stay with us as we turn over to our next story. We head over to the United States, and a newly released FBI document suggests US President Donald Trump called the Palm Beach police chief in 2006, saying everyone has known about Jeffrey Epstein's behavior. The interview with former police chief Michael Reiter claims Trump praised the investigation and said he had thrown Epstein out of Mar-a-Lago. He reportedly also described Ghislaine Maxwell as Epstein's operative and evil. Trump has consistently denied knowledge of Epstein's crimes, saying he broke ties around 2004. The White House says the call may or may not have happened and stands by Trump's account that he removed Epstein from Mar-a-Lago. Maxwell, serving a 20-year sentence for recruiting underage girls for Epstein, recently testified before Congress, but refused to answer questions, invoking the Fifth Amendment. The document adds renewed scrutiny to what Trump knew about Epstein and when. That is an unfolding saga. We'll continue to bring you all of it. But now we turn down under, and Israel's President Isaac Herzog says anti-Semitism in Australia is frightening, speaking at the end of his visit amid protests and heightened security. The comments come as demonstrations continued during the president's visit, with pro-Palestinian protesters gathering in several cities. In Melbourne, police are investigating after "Death to Herzog" graffiti was found at Melbourne University, raising fresh concerns over hate speech and campus safety. Australian authorities have condemned anti-Semitism, saying that such acts have no place in the country as debate continues over free speech and public protest. Joining us once again is Peter Baum. Peter, is this an isolated flare-up during a controversial visit for the Israeli Prime Minister? Of course, he is there visiting the site of the Sydney Bondi attacks, showing solidarity with the Jewish community there amidst a wider tour of the country. What were your thoughts on these protests and the greeting that Herzog received from the Australian people?
Yeah, indeed. Well, I know Australia very well, Thomas, having close family there and having visited the country a number of times. Since the events of October the 7th, the Australian government and the vast majority of the Australian media have adopted an agenda which is consistently demonising the Jewish state of Israel, has facilitated and encouraged anti-Zion, anti-Semitism, and these protests during President Herzog's visit was to be expected. I think Herzog has been very, very brave in going there in the knowledge that he was going to be subjected to the kind of disgraceful protests that have happened, consolidating Israel's stance with the Jewish community out there.
Peter,
it was a very, very brave thing to do.
Peter, of course, would you say that the Australian people shouldn't be protesting against a leader of a state that they think has committed atrocities in the Gaza Strip? Would you say they don't have the right to do such a thing?
Not at all. They certainly have the right to protest, but isn't it ironic, Thomas, that the Australians, which is a colonial project, as we all know, recently passed a referendum, I think in October 24, denying equal rights to the indigenous peoples of Australia. Arabs and Muslims in Israel have more equal rights in civic society than indigenous peoples do in
Right.
Australia. So it's quite ironic that a country which was a colonial and racist project should protest against the Israeli president. Of course, they have the right, but it's fueled not by pro-Palestinianism, but more by anti-Semitism.
Well, of course, that's widely disputed, Peter. But do you think incidents like this strain bilateral relations between Israel and Australia? How would you assess them now? Of course, we saw a sparring match, if you will, by that of Netanyahu and Albanese straight after the Australian recognition of a Palestinian state or the announcement to do so. How do you assess their bilateral relations now? Of course, following that recognition and following the terrible attack in Bondi, of course.
Yeah, bilateral relations are very strained at the moment. There's no doubt about it. There's still trade going on between the two countries, and there's still connectivity when it comes to geopolitical security. Of that, the Australians equivalent of the Secret Service and the Israeli Mossad work together very closely. So, and as I say, import and export products are still going on. Now, we've seen what can happen should there be a change of government in either country, whether Netanyahu goes or whether Albanese goes, and damaged relations can be repaired very quickly. But for the moment, as you quite rightly identify, relations are strained. Israelis are being targeted in Australia, and as long as the Albanese government adopts its agenda, and as long as the vast majority of the Australian press, although there has been pushback recently, continues on demonising Israel, that will further encourage and facilitate the kind of anti-Jewish protests that we've seen in the main cities in Australia recently.
Peter Baum there. Thank you very much for joining us, Peter. Great to speak to you, as always. We turn over to our next story now, and China's Commerce Ministry has warned Mexico to reconsider imposing tariffs, stating it would take steps to protect its interests. However, no countermeasures have been taken so far. On the other hand, China's top automaker, BYD, has expressed interest in establishing a factory in Mexico in 2024. However, concerns over potential technology leaks to the US have delayed the approval process. These discussions occur as US Trade Representative Catherine Tai, along with officials from Mexico and Canada, prepares to review their free trade agreement by July the 1st. The US has indicated it may push for stricter rules on Chinese origin goods to prevent Chinese firms from using Mexico as a base for exports. Joining us to discuss this is Dr. Ajay Jua, a former Secretary of Commerce and senior economist. He joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much for joining us here on the program. Is Mexico here walking a tightrope between Washington and Beijing, and what's your assessment of how it's performing?
Thank you for having me in this discussion. I'm under the impression that Mexico, at one point of time, as we know, had China as its second highest trading partner, just after the US. But it doesn't want to really give up on trading with the US, its largest partner, with which its trilateral agreement, Canada, US, and Mexico, has come up for review, as you mentioned, and it's due for replacement or a revisit before July 26. The US wouldn't like Mexico to have close relationships with China, and certainly would like to have its tariffs in alignment with what the US has proposed. So President of Mexico, she had proposed a 35% tariff on goods coming from China, thousands of goods, including auto components, one of the largest producers of which is China. Chinese have certainly not liked the idea. This was mentioned to them yesterday and the day before when the negotiations or the first set of discussions took place in Beijing between the two countries. But the Chinese have, realizing that there is some pressure upon Mexico, have been actually easing up. They are going easy on the proposal to set up the BYD car plant in Mexico. They have not really followed it up, particularly as they fear that some of the EV confidentialities, so-called EV making secrets, might get leaked to the US. And the US is a big market for EVs, which China would like to deal with on its own. That is why also the rules of origin, which are being prescribed by the US on what happens in Mexico. On the whole, I think that going forward, China would want to trade with Mexico, but on its own terms. And Mexico finds itself in a tight position because for it, it's more convenient to trade under the trilateral agreement, which it has had for several years, with across the border United States rather than a distant Chinese. But in the past, the US is very right. China has been using Mexico for entry port trade. That means goods coming from China, reassembled, repacked, were going to the US, and US would see that as bypassing the tariff arrangements which it has with the China.
Dr. Dewar, thank you so much for joining us and providing that explanation here on NewsX World. It's a great pleasure to talk to you. We now have to move on, however, and for our next story, we head to the US once again, and federal prosecutors have released body cam footage in the case of Marimar Martinez, a Chicago woman who was shot multiple times by a Border Patrol agent last fall. The footage, along with other documents, challenges the Department of Homeland Security's account, which claimed Martinez rammed the agent's vehicle. Let's take a look at the footage shared by federal prosecutors.
It's something that's... Oh, you want that better? All right, it's time to get aggressive because they're trying to box us in. Watch out. All right, we're going to make contact and we're boxed in. We are boxed in. All
right, we're fine now. All right, out of the car.
Be advised, we've been struck. We've been struck.
Get out.
Don't you move.
The video suggests the agents could have struck Martinez's car themselves. The incident occurred in October the 4th of last year when Martinez, a Montessori schoolteacher, was following the agents to warn residents of their presence. After the collision, Border Control agent Charles Exum fired 5 shots at Martinez. Martinez now plans to file a lawsuit after charges against her were dropped, and the DHS continues to label her as a domestic terrorist. Let's listen in to what the attorney for Marimar Martinez, Michael Gallagher, had to say on the issue.
This agent should be off the streets. I believe he should be criminally prosecuted. We have none of those powers. We can hold them accountable monetarily, and we'll be asking for damages in the tens of millions of dollars when we do get our day in court.
Colonel Sanjeet Sirohi joins us now, an international relations and defence expert, joining us live from New Delhi. The Department of Homeland Security has been under much scrutiny over how its agents have interacted with certain members of the American public. This is a case in many. What more can you tell us about this one specifically in the broader relationship with its attitude towards alleged misconduct by its agents?
Thank you, Thomas, for having me on your listening channel. Now, this has been going on for quite some time, and I think what I can say about all this thing, what is happening is this is high-handedness of the agents, the federal agents. Their language, what they are using is totally deplorable. And what they are trying to do, they are calling them domestic terrorists. I call them state-sponsored terrorists. Because the way they are conducting themselves, they are saying that their vehicle was ambushed. I don't understand, if the other person is not having a weapon, how can their vehicle be ambushed? And when they are saying that she was impeding their agents. Now, I don't understand, if she was trying to ambush or she was trying to ram their vehicle, then when they came out, why did they fire at her? And that the person who fired, I think his name is Axum, and he is showing his great by saying that I am a great marksman and I have fired 5 rounds and she had a 7 hole. So I think this is totally rubbish, and what they are trying to do, every time they had killed 2 earlier people like Rani Good and Alexei Pretty, and in Alexei Pretty case also they have said that it was in case of self-defense. I don't understand, if a lady is driving a vehicle, how can it be a self-defense, and why should they fire on her? And later on, when it was checked, they had got their vehicles repaired before even the defense people could go and inspect the vehicle. So I think there is totally chaos, and there is something wrong with these federal agents who are working, and who is instructing them, who is giving them the orders. It has to be checked and it has to be verified. Thomas.
Yes, and of course the Department of Homeland Security, led by Kristi Noem, do you see them, after all the past controversies, taking a step back in their approach? This, of course, follows the killing of 2 individuals in Minneapolis, among other previous less severe incidents like this one. Do you see them going forward, rethinking their strategy?
They should have done long time back, and I have been on your channel on this issue number of times, and I have said that their approach, their intention may be correct, but their approach to handle these situations is totally incorrect. And I again say that the way the federal agents are working, I think they are working as a terrorist. They are calling the normal citizens of the country as domestic terrorists. I call them, they are the state-sponsored terrorists. And they are behaving in such a manner that they don't belong to this country, the way they are conducting themselves. And I think the federal agents must be guided, and they must be counseled, and they must be reprimanded for their actions at the earliest, so that the message goes to all other federal agents who are getting involved in all these things, and they are firing in self-defense and firing 5 rounds. You don't fire 5 rounds in self-defense, you fire only 1 or 2 rounds, and those rounds are fired in the leg, not in the other parts of the body. So I don't understand how these federal agents are working, and who is guiding them, and how they are being trained. Thomas.
Major General Sirohi, thank you so much for joining us here on NewsX World. A pleasure to talk to you as always. We now turn to our next story, and we go to Europe. France is launching an unusual campaign targeting 29-year-olds, sending them government letters encouraging them to think about having children before their fertility declines. Officials say the initiative is part of a broader 16-month plan to address the country's falling birth rate, which sits at about 1.56 children per woman, well below the 2.1 needed for population stability. The letters, due to be mailed nationwide by summer, will include balanced, science-based information on fertility, sexual and reproductive health, and options such as egg freezing, which in France is available free of charge through the health system for people aged 29 to 37. Health Minister Stéphanie Rist says the aim is to educate rather than pressure citizens on when to start a family. The campaign is motivated by concerns that many people delay parenthood and later face fertility challenges. Critics, however, argue that reminders from the state risk infringing on personal choice and point to deeper socio-economic issues such as housing costs and childcare that influence decisions about having children. The government sees the outrage as one tool among many, including expanding fertility research and egg freezing centres to help reverse demographic decline and support future economic stability. Kosovo's parliament has elected Albin Kurti as Prime Minister for the third time, finally ending a year-long political gridlock. After spending 12 months as a caretaker, Kurti's party won December's snap election, securing him 66 votes in the 120-seat parliament. With his victory, Kurti pledged to focus on normalising relations with Serbia, despite ongoing tensions, especially in the northern region. This step is crucial for both Kosovo and Serbia, as they both seek to progress towards European Union membership very soon. But that's all that we have time for this hour. Keep watching NewsX World for more international news updates.
In the midst of this, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
Hello and welcome. I am Thomas Porteous and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories of this hour. Police say an 18-year-old woman killed her mother and stepbrother before opening fire at her former school in Tumbler Ridge, British Columbia. 9 people, including a suspect who died by suicide, are dead in one of Canada's deadliest mass shootings. The motive is still unknown. Nearly 127 million voters head to the polls in Bangladesh, a key test of democracy after Sheikh Hasina was ousted in 2024. The race pits the BNP against Jamaat-e-Islami-led coalition as voters also decide on a new national charter. President Donald Trump says talks with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu produce no definitive agreement on Iran. Netanyahu says Israel's security must be protected and signals no clear US commitment to expand talks beyond Iran's nuclear program. An advisor to Iran's supreme leader says Tehran will not compromise on its missile capabilities amid ongoing talks with the United States. Ali Sham-Khani calls the missile program non-negotiable during events marking the anniversary of the Islamic Revolution. Pro-Palestinian protesters rally in Melbourne on the final day of Israeli President Isaac Herzog's visit after clashes in Sydney and demonstrations in Canberra. Protesters unite across the country as Prime Minister Anthony Albanese hosts the visit following a deadly Sydney shooting. Ukrainian officials say Kyiv is under a massive Russian missile attack, with explosions reported and buildings hit across the capital. Emergency teams are deployed and no casualties are confirmed in Kyiv. Elsewhere in the country, Ukrainian officials say Russian strikes killed 4 civilians in 3 villages in the Dnipropetrovsk region. The governor says multiple people are wounded in the attacks, including a woman and a man whose wife is killed. The US House votes 219 to 211 to reject Donald Trump's tariffs on Canadian goods, with 6 Republicans joining Democrats in a rare rebuke. The measure now moves the Senate, but faces a likely presidential veto if it reaches the White House. We start our bulletin in South Asia, and polling has opened across Bangladesh in a general election being closely watched at home and abroad. Amid opposition claims of intimidation and concerns over transparency, Shangfur Rahman, an Islamist opposition leader from Jamaat-e-Islami party, says he will do whatever is required to ensure a fair vote, as millions of Bangladeshis head to polling stations nationwide. Reporting says voting began earlier today under heavy security, with authorities deploying police and paramilitary forces to prevent unrest. The government says the election will be free and fair, while critics argue the political playing field remains uneven. Results are expected after polls close later today. Joining us now is Major General A.K. Sewach, a geostrategic expert, joining us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much for joining us. Free and fair, that is what the interim government has said going into this election that this will be. Do you think this will bring stability to Bangladesh?
Thomas, no doubt about it. This elections, one can't say that it will be totally free and fair. Let's see how things pan out. But they are not inclusive. You remember that the Awami League, which has almost about 25 to 30% of base, has been banned and they are not participating in election. So election can't be inclusive until unless all political parties are given a chance. And the second thing is that there is a lot of pressure on minority communities. They may not come forward to excite their franchise. That's a very, very important thing. And now 3-4 things stand out as far as these elections are concerned. This election is first time taking place where Sheikh Hasina of Awami League and Khalida Zia of BNP both are not there. Now, Sheikh Hasina has already come to India. She has taken sort of a self-exile, whereas Khalida Zia has died in December. But the problem which is occurred now is what happened, that the way Sheikh Hasina was removed and thereafter the violence has erupted. And now the elections which are taking place, the Jamaat-e-Islami, which was earlier banned, is now contested election, which is considered to be pro-Pakistan. And the BNP, the Bangladesh Nationalist Party, where headed by Tariq Rahman, the son of Khalida Zia, is likely to be a front runner. Basically the Janjis, who were in the forefront of that protest, have joined hands with the Awami League in the 11-party coalition there. So what will be the outcome? That will dictate what will be the relation of Bangladesh with India. But certainly these elections are going to be very important. There are about 17 crore population in Bangladesh, almost 12 crore people will exercise their franchise, and they are all young people. Almost 30% people are less than 30 years of age. Thomas.
Yeah, indeed. Of course, 300 directly elected seats are up for grabs, with 127 million people eligible to vote today, with 5 million people roughly voting for the very first time. What could this mean for Bangladesh's trajectory in regional terms? How might it influence its relationship with India, China, Pakistan, of course, in the wider perspective, depending on who wins? Of course, the BNP are the front runners right now. What would that mean?
No doubt about it. In last 15 years, the India-Bangladesh relation were extremely good. In fact, in Sheikh Hasina government, 3-4 things happened. One is that economically, Bangladesh has progressed very high. Its textile industry was doing extremely well, and once upon a time, their per capita income was even become more than India. Now, as far as the northeast is concerned, the peace has come in northeast. One of the reason can be also the way Sheikh Hasina government has at that point of time cooperated with India, and all the militant group which had their hideouts in Chittagong Hill, they were removed from there. So the relation between India and Bangladesh was the best in last 15 years, and both the countries stand to gain in that. In fact, the boundary deal was also signed in 2015, where we could resolve the boundary dispute between both the countries. But of late, like when Mohammad Yunus has become an interim advisor and chief advisor in Bangladesh, things have gone extremely bad as far as India is concerned. There are anti-India sentiment, anti-minority sentiment. A lot of minorities were killed. Now the question comes: who will come into power? Because Jamaat-e-Islami and BNP are the two front runners. The BNP of Khalida Jia, now headed by Tariq Rahman, possibly is the front runner, and they possibly can form a government. And one still feels the BNP is a better choice as far as India is concerned, because they will act moderate. They will like to improve the relation with India. But in case Jamaat-e-Islami comes along with the NCP, that will not be a good news for India, because Jamaat-e-Islami has been traditionally anti-India, and they are the one which supported Pakistan during that 97 war and liberation war of Bangladesh. Now, what can be the outcome and what impact it will be? See, as far as Pakistan is concerned, it is making its footprints increasing in Bangladesh. ISI is now increasing its influence, and the point which is coming is the radicalization is increasing in Bangladesh, and Jamaat-e-Islami and Bangladesh Mujahideen were becoming very popular with the people, in the sense because they were following anti-minorities, anti-India sentiment. Now, the point which come is that the relation between Pakistan and Bangladesh are upswing. Even Bangladesh is ready to buy a number of armaments from Pakistan, like JF-17. Now, as far as China is concerned, China got this opportunity, and China is now trying to make use of it. In the sense, one is they are doing a lot of economic projects in Bangladesh. They may get into the trap, Bangladesh. Lamnori Hart Air Base is one, then Mongla Port has been modernized. So, as far as China is concerned, it's more of an economic region. They will make sure that their economic clout increase in Bangladesh. So, overall, how things will fan out after the election, what time will tell. But India is very, very cautious, because our 5 northeast states have a border with Bangladesh. The election outcome will make a tremendous impact, especially in Assam, where the elections are going to take place very recently, say almost after 2-3 months. So overall, we will like that the election to be taken peaceful and fair, though they are not inclusive because the Awami League is banned. But let's see how things fan out. But India will like to maintain a good relation. In case the BNP comes into power, the chances of having good relation with Bangladesh are still very high compared to in case Jamaat-e-Islami and the NCP come into power.
Okay, thank you very much for joining us, Major General Sawatch, here on NewsX World. It's a great pleasure to talk to you, as always. We now turn on to our next story. The US House has narrowly voted to block President Donald Trump's tariffs on Canada. Lawmakers passed a resolution 219 to 211 to end Trump's use of a national emergency to justify the trade measures. 6 Republicans joined Democrats in support. The move is largely symbolic and faces an expected presidential veto, but the Senate has already voted twice to challenge the tariffs. Trump imposed 25% tariffs earlier this year, later raising some to 35%, citing fentanyl smuggling, but US officials say less than 1% of fentanyl enters from Canada. Joining us on this is Professor Veselin Popovsky. He's a professor and vice dean at Jindal Global Law School, joining us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much for joining us. We've seen 6 Republicans here go against the GOP in this House vote. Obviously, it is expected a presidential veto. These tariffs are expected to stay in place. However, this is pretty significant, a symbolic move by House Republicans. Does that show that opposition is growing inside Donald Trump's Republican Party?
Yes, absolutely, Thomas. You are very correct here. And we will see more and more of this as we go to the midterm elections in November. Many Republicans are already very disillusioned with this president, and they don't expect anything good to happen with such erratic and incompetent president. And obviously, the negative effect comes back to the American people here. With all these tariffs, impositions of restrictions, foreign policy move, demands, and the traditional Republican Party foreign policy has been very, conservative, very much relying on international law, on the rules of law. If we remember back the time of Ronald Reagan, George Bush, support for regimes that are democratic, and on the opposite, pressures and sanctions on regimes that are non-democratic and authoritarian. Donald Trump does exactly the opposite of all the history of this Republican Party, going back to Abraham Lincoln. So no doubt, this is significant, as you said. 6 Republicans voted yesterday, and more Republicans will get more and more disappointed with this president. And I wouldn't even exclude an opportunity for impeachment in next year once the midterm elections are over. There will be apparently a majority in the House and maybe even a majority of Democrats in the Senate, and then it will depend how many Republican senators by that time, I'm talking 1 year from now, will be further disappointed by this president.
And of course, there's been certain policies, whether it be home or abroad, that have seen opposition from Republican lawmakers, both in the Senate and the House, throughout his first year of his presidency, whether that be the annexation of Greenland, to how the Justice Department has dealt with the release of the Epstein files, to just Donald Trump's overall comments on his Truth Social. We have seen opposition there. Oh, yes. Donald Trump has changed the Republican Party over the last decade, of course, but does this show that his second term is showing that influence to be whittled away slightly?
Yes, absolutely. It's a shameful period for the Republican Party itself, and they already bear those fruits, those negative fruits, because certainly, as I said, it's not in the traditions of this party, which has very long and very successful terms in the past, and will be remembered for those. And Donald Trump will be like an exceptional time where something wrong happened in the minds of the Republican Party mostly. How could they allow such president to serve 2 years? 2 terms will be an issue for the future history to discuss. But obviously, everything will normalize in 1 year from now, I'm sure. Once those who need to be elected will no longer have any reliance on Donald Trump. He will not be a factor for future elections. It is his last term. And future candidates for the Senate or for the House will not rely at all on Donald Trump. So his influence will diminish and decline in the next 12 months. You are absolutely right in your analysis. It's both internal and foreign policy issues that over time will reduce this president's influence, and I think also everybody around him. People, J.D. Vance, Marco Rubio, everybody associated with Trump will one day suffer the consequences of this incompetent president. There will be new faces in the Republican Party running for the next presidential elections. Nobody around Trump will have any chance of success.
Professor Popovsky, do stay with us as we move to another Trump-related development. And Israel will join US President Donald Trump's Board of Peace Initiative. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu made the announcement during his visit to Washington. After meeting Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Netanyahu posted on X that he had signed Israel's formal accession to the board. The Board of Peace was authored by a UN Security Council resolution in mid-November, and it allows participating countries to help establish an international stabilization force in Gaza, where a fragile ceasefire has been in place since October the 10th under a Trump-backed plan agreed to by Israel and Hamas. The board was initially designed to oversee Gaza's temporary governance. Trump has said it will be expanded to address broader global conflicts, with him serving as chair. Its first meeting is set for February the 19th in Washington, where members will discuss Gaza's reconstruction. Professor Popovsky joins us once again in this discussion. Professor, Donald Trump's Board of Peace, Israel has now joined, a board which of course is said to oversee the reconstruction of Gaza and imposing an international stabilization force in Gaza, among other things. Now, some of the key figures at the top, the likes of Jared Kushner, Marco Rubio, Tony Blair, they have all been seen and have been criticized as appointments for their biased leanings towards the Israeli state. Now that Israel has officially is officially a part of this Board of Peace, what does that say about the organization going forward, given that we have Israeli membership but absolutely no sign of any Palestinian one?
Well, the idea is to bring together Israeli and Palestinians. So for that matter, there will be a transitional administration by Palestinians. And they brought one businessman from Egypt who will be appointed as a temporary administrator of Gaza. So Gaza will not be ruled by Israel, definitely. And the idea here is somehow to think about the future of economic reconstruction, of rebuilding the institutions in Gaza. Generally, the initial idea is very good, and I'm very supportive to have a body because of the lack of United Nations to step in. I must say, I'm very critical here for the total silence from the United Nations. Antonio Guterres doesn't say anything. Where is the Department of Peace Building in United Nations in New York here? Ideally, they should step in and not Donald Trump into Gaza and make peace between Palestinians and Israelis. Well, they appointed Nikolai Mladenov, who is a former Secretary General envoy to Iraq, Libya, and Gaza. He knows very well the Palestinians. And he's the executive director of the Board of Peace, actually the technocrat, the person who knows very well everybody, both sides, Palestinians and Israeli. So it's a good idea, but it is again spoiled by Donald Trump, by his ambitions to have a role as an eternal peacemaker. And the statute, the constitution of the Board of Peace is very much disappointing and nonsensical because it mentions Trump 10 times and it doesn't mention Gaza. So very good initial idea, which has been spoiled by Donald Trump and his circle. And obviously some appointment, as you mentioned, of Kushner and Tony Blair, they are very much inappropriate. But again, I hope over time, the United Nations, with the new Secretary General, by the way, coming by the end of 26, will step in and will really take care of Gaza in a proper way, in a neutral way, impartial, with Palestinian transitional administration, and with Israeli providing some security guarantees for some time, and that's also very important to have cooperation between Israel and those who will step in Gaza as a long-term peace-building mission, ideally under the umbrella of the United Nations.
This is what I wanted to bring up, actually. Of course, there are some traditional Palestinian allies on the board of peace, and of course huge allies of Trump as well. You've got the Qatari leadership, Turkey. We know Erdogan and Donald Trump, they are very close personally, as Donald Trump frequently likes to say. Saudi Arabia has agreed to be part of it as well. Not a member of the Abraham Accords, may I add. How might this tussle develop while Donald Trump is in the middle, trying to balance these diplomatic relationships that the United States newly has under him, not with Israel, of course, but with these Gulf states, very warm relationships, with rebuilding Gaza?
Yes, generally I'm kind of optimistic here. It will work long term, despite those, ambitions by Donald Trump to be seen as a leader of the process, because there are so many factors, as you mentioned, in the region, and they are much more important, by the way. The role of Qatar and Egypt in making the deal between Israel and Gaza is significant. Donald Trump stepped very late into this. Those negotiations started almost immediately after October 7th, and the praise should go to Qatari and Egyptians mediators, and we don't even know the names of all of them. Exactly, because in negotiations it's better to keep silence and to do the work rather than to go to the newspapers and media and report, what Donald Trump does, but the work actually is done by Qatari, Egyptians, Turkish, Saudis, and I think long term it will be a regional effort that the history will remember exactly those regional actors helping to make the peace in Gaza long term. And with the diminishing of Hamas, with the less and less role played by Iran in supporting those proxies in Hezbollah, in Hamas, in the Houthis, over time, I'm optimistic that all of this will play well together in the region. So I don't have doubt that if not the board of peace, but the future long-term peace-building body, I will call it, once Trump is gone, will deliver the necessary long-term peace in the Middle East.
Professor Veselin Popovsky, thank you so much for joining us. It's always a great pleasure to speak to you. We now turn from the Middle East to the United States of America. And US lawmakers have accused Attorney General Pam Bondi of concealing powerful associates of the late financier Jeffrey Epstein. Representative Thomas Massie, who is a Republican, criticized the Justice Department for withholding key documents in a heated hearing. Bondi faced backlash after the department released millions of pages with many files heavily redacted, frustrating victims and lawyers. In a related development, India's oil minister Hardeep Singh Puri has acknowledged meeting Epstein several times but denies any wrongdoing. Meanwhile, Epstein's associates continue to come under scrutiny as fresh revelations fuel public and political pressure. Let's listen in to what the Indian oil minister Hardeep Singh Puri had to say.
In the month of November 2014, I was a private citizen. Somebody says they want to look at India. I may have a meeting with Reid Hoffman, who is the founder of LinkedIn, on the west coast of the United States. And I start my email by saying, I am now convinced more than ever that India today presents a terrific opportunity and that Reid Hoffman should visit India to see the changes which are coming. Or another thing I want to tell you, ये जो चीजें मैं बोल रहा हूँ, Digital India, Make in India, I'm talking about this in the month of November 2014. If memory serves me right, these projects started in 2015. So here I was a far-sighted private citizen who knows what kind of work the Modi government is going to do and the kind of transformation is here. So if this is what it is, this is what they call Hardeep Puri's name appears in LinkedIn.
We turn now to Southeast Asia, and a school principal named Sasifat Sinsamorason in southern Thailand has died after being shot by an 18-year-old gunman who stormed the Phatong Prathan Kiriwat school near Hat Yai.
What we can do as the
Hello and welcome, I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top headlines of this hour. Long lines form as Bangladeshis begin voting in a high-stakes election following the 2024 ouster of longtime Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. Counting starts this evening with results expected by Friday as a referendum runs in parallel and the main contests pits the BNP against the Jamaat-led coalition. Police say an 18-year-old woman killed her mother and stepbrother before opening fire at her former school in Tumber Ridge, British Columbia. 9 people, including the suspect who died by suicide, are dead in one of Canada's deadliest mass shootings. The motive is still unknown. Russia fires drones and ballistic missiles across Ukraine overnight, targeting energy systems and injuring at least 7 people in Kyiv, Dnipro and Odessa. Ukrainian officials say hundreds of weapons disrupt power, heating and water as a massive attack hits buildings in the capital. President Donald Trump says talks with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu produced no definitive agreement on Iran. Netanyahu says Israel's security must be protected and signals no clear US commitment to expand talks beyond Iran's nuclear program. Prime Minister Netanyahu also says that Israel joins President Trump's Board of Peace during talks in Washington. Images show Netanyahu signing the accession document after meeting Secretary of State Marco Rubio. Meanwhile, an advisor to Iran's supreme leader says Tehran will not compromise on its missile capabilities amid ongoing talks with the US. Ali Shamkhani calls the missile program non-negotiable during events marking the anniversary of the Islamic Revolution. Pro-Palestinian protesters rally in Melbourne on the final day of Israeli President Isaac Herzog's visit after clashes in Sydney and demonstrations in Canberra. Protesters unite across the country as Prime Minister Anthony Albanese hosts the visit following a deadly Sydney shooting. The US House votes 219 to 211 to reject Donald Trump's tariffs on Canadian goods, with 6 Republicans joining Democrats in a rare rebuke. The measure now moves to the Senate but faces a likely presidential veto if it reaches the White House. We start this hour with some breaking news, and reports of a blast at a voting booth have emerged as polling continues in the general election in Bangladesh. Local media says the explosion occurred at a polling station during voting hours, triggering panic among voters and election staff. Reports say that some workers have been killed, but these are merely reports right now. Bangladesh University security forces have rushed to the scene and the area has been sealed off as authorities investigate the cause of the blast. Officials have yet to confirm whether the incident was election related or the result of any militant activity. Polling in the area has been temporarily disrupted as investigations continue. We'll bring you more on that as soon as we get it. Bangladeshis turned out in large numbers today for what many are calling a landmark national election. Long lines formed outside polling stations across the country, with tight security in place to ensure a peaceful vote. This, of course, is a huge situation coming out of Bangladesh. a blast inside the country during an election which is hugely significant. There are, of course, huge fears about something like this happening. But of course, these are reports coming out of the country. We have limited information as of far. According to some reports, it is a crude bomb explosion in Hasina's former stronghold of Gopal Ganj in the polling area there. This occurred about an hour ago. We're now showing you visuals, reported casualties coming out of the area. Joining us to discuss this is Collins Chong-Ukit, a Foreign Affairs, Security and Strategy Analyst. He joins us live from Kuala Lumpur. Thank you very much, Collins, for joining us. As we said previously, a huge moment for Bangladesh today. There were fears that something like this might happen. Security has been heightened in the country to prevent such a thing. However, it has not been enough, clearly. This has occurred in the former Awami League stronghold of Gopal Ganj. How might this impact the political landscape, people's will to come out to vote? How might this impact the election as a whole?
Yeah, we have seen how this, the sense of renewed, urgency and optimism by the people. This is a landmark election. It's a reset after prolonged political turbulence. So after years of polarization, boycotts, street protests, and disputes of legitimacy, so this electoral cycle has been the most important for Bangladesh. And of course, it's a test of institutional credibility. Also, it's a generational inflection point, as we have seen how almost half of the voters will be under 35, and priorities for youth now in terms of jobs, inflation, meritocracy and democracy have now been the main factors. And despite all this, we have seen how the influence and presence of the Awami League. We have seen how the front runner for this election will still be is still being led by the Bangladesh Nationalist Party, and the Jamaat-led coalition is still catching up. But in terms of the demographic advantages, the Jamaat-led coalition still has the advantage in terms of getting the discontent with the youth, the younger demographics. But in terms of the overall conditions of the country, in terms of having this new way forward for economic rejuvenation, as well as reforms and all that, we see that the BNP still retains the overwhelming majority support. So it remains to be seen how this will turn out. But in terms of structure, overall confidence and leadership capacity of both parties, we still see that the BNP still retains some key advantages here moving forward.
Indeed, and young voters played a large role in last year's protests, 2024's protests, in ousting Sheikh Hasina. There are now over 5 million new voters in Bangladesh. Can they shape policy, or will their influence fade after the ballots are counted?
Definitely, we have seen how the combined synergy and the capacity for them to influence decision-making processes, and of course they are yearning for greater job opportunities, freedom, and governance priorities, and of course these have been the key priorities for both parties. But we have seen the age, the side advantage being felt by the coalition, the Jamaat-led coalition alliance. And of course, the BNP has been focusing more towards economic reform and the new way forward in terms of also measures of anti-corruption and to tackle this economic stagnation. And this has also been among the key voter concerns. But in terms of also the reach, the volume, the strategic linkages across the country, we have seen how BNP has got the edge as opposed to this Jamaat-led alliance, and of course also the persona, the influence of individuals. We have Tariq Rahman and all that. But definitely, whoever wins, there needs to be stability, and we need to avoid this kind of post-election, risk of greater tensions or complexities. And I think both coalitions are well aware of that, and hence the role of the younger people, the new voters, and the younger demographics have never been more important, for this election.
Indeed. Do stay with us, Collins, as we have more information coming out of Bangladesh today. We'll, of course, keep you updated on that developing situation coming out of Gopalgraj. But in general, Bangladeshis turned out in large numbers today for what many are calling a landmark national election. Long lines formed outside polling stations across the country with tight security in place to ensure a peaceful vote. Election officials reported steady turnout in major cities, including the capital Dhaka. Key issues in the campaign have included inflation, job creation and government accountability. Young voters say they are looking for transparency and economic opportunity, while analysts say the outcome could shape the country's political direction for years to come. Authorities say ballot counting will begin after polls close as the nation waits to see who will lead Bangladesh into its next chapter. Let's now listen in to what voters had to say.
অনেক বছর পরে আজকে ভোট দিতে এসেছি, খুব ভালো লাগছে।
Collins joins us once again. Of course, Collins, a hugely significant election, a landmark day for Bangladeshis. We'll know at some point in the next 48 hours what the result is. However, there is a promise of deep political reform here. Do you think that the winners of this can pursue this, the winners of this election can pursue this without causing major political instability?
Well, the key lies on the the capacity for both sides to to come to terms on the common needs of the country, and we have seen how there have been similar platforms being championed by both sides, and of course the BNP has one of the core platforms will be to, of course, to revive the economy, to have greater anti-corruption measures, and to limit also the term limit for the Prime Minister, and to restore this institutional trust and the sanctity of the democratic institutions after years of turbulence and volatility. As for the Jamaat-led coalition, we have seen how the emphasis has been more on social support in terms of also addressing youth unemployment, which have also been one of the key issues here, and to have a broader welfare programs for the people. So but according to polls now and projections, and remains to be seen. But also the needs also to have an inclusive approach to address the concerns of both sides, and to have more of an inclusive outreach also to include to bridge the urban-rural gap as well, and the new way forward for the economic prospect of the country in terms of moving away from conventional economic status quo. And of course, this has been one of the key areas that both are also looking into. But and also the readiness by both sides to form a coalition party should there's no majority being formed after this. So and of course not to discount also the role and influences of the smaller parties. The independents. We have seen the rise of these smaller parties and contesting smaller number of seats, but also although they have limited national reach, the influence is growing, and it remains to be seen also how this will shape in terms of the overall direction. But we have seen how momentum has moved forward, and we will see in the next couple of days now.
Collins Chong Yu Keat, thank you so much for taking out the time and joining us here on the broadcast. We turn now to Beijing, and China has condemned any attempts to annex Palestinian territories following Israel's approval of new measures to tighten control over the occupied West Bank. Foreign Ministry spokesman Lin Jian said China opposes the construction of new settlements and any encroachment on Palestinian land. The statement underscores Beijing's support for Palestinian sovereignty amid rising tensions in the region. China called for peaceful resolutions and adherence to international law regarding the Palestinian territories. Joining us now to discuss this is Keith Vaz, a former British minister. He joins us live from Mumbai. Keith, thank you so much for joining us here on NewsX World. It's a pleasure to talk to you, as always. First of all, of course, this statement coming out of Beijing comes as the Israeli Likud coalition and Bezalel Smotrich, the finance minister in particular, approves further settlement plans encroaching into Palestinian territory, which the majority of the international community, along with the United Nations, sees as illegal. This statement from Beijing, is China's condemnation purely principled here, or is it part of a broader strategy to expand influence in the Middle East and, of course, put its foot into international affairs and a bit further?
Standing position, Thomas. This is a position that's been held by China for some time. But what they're trying to do now is to call out what is a further expansion of the settlements. And it is clear that although everyone supported a ceasefire, and your viewers will remember the great signing ceremony where President Trump and others were there, nobody seems to be honoring what was agreed at that ceasefire, which is that you should go on and start negotiating for peace. So China, which does not have a history of making statements of this kind, they tend to be more observers than countries that get involved in any way. They are making it very clear that they do want to get involved and that there should not be further annexation. So President Trump needs to take on board what China is saying. China, of course, is not a member of the Board of Peace for Gaza. Israel is, and other countries are. I think to a large extent others have joined because they don't want to be not on the train when it leaves the station, rather than any affection for what is being proposed. So this is an important statement that has been made, and one that needs to be followed very carefully.
Is this Israeli-Palestinian issue becoming another arena for US-China rivalry? Do you expect to see Beijing, as it grows as an economic power, as a world power, make more statements like this, get involved in international affairs, international conflicts in the future as its economy grows?
Yes, I do. I think that people inside China have probably felt that it was enough to be an observer. It's time to move forward. If you don't move forward, then you move backwards, or you stay still, which is the same as moving backwards. America's foreign policy is developed on an hourly basis. China has to respond to that. And of course, tied into all this is the trade arrangements, the tariffs that have been imposed, which they are still not very happy with. So I expect this to happen again in the future.
China, of course, continues to maintain it adheres to the United Nations Charter. These Israeli settlements, however, in the West Bank have been ruled illegal for years now. If Israel moves forward towards annexation, which it is doing in all but name, what are the real consequences under international law in this day and age?
Well, you can't go on ignoring decisions made by the international community forever. And I think that though there has been no sanction to this, no one is saying if you expand your settlement, if you don't have a ceasefire, action is going to be taken, simply because they have the most powerful guarantor in the world, the United States of America. So none of these other countries, having just had a near-death experience in Greenland, is going to want to take up the cudgels against the United States. So to some extent, the war of words, the war of activities can go on without it being checked until a country like China is prepared to put down a thick red line.
Keith Vaz, do stay with us as we move to some more statements from Beijing. China has labelled Taiwan's leader, Lai Ching-te, a war instigator following his comments in an interview. Lai warned that Beijing would target other countries in the region if it seized control of Taiwan. Beijing's foreign ministry spokesperson, Lin Jian, condemned Lai's remarks, calling them a clear indication of his pro-independence stance. Lin accused Lai of being a peace disruptor, crisis creator and war instigator, further escalating tensions between China and Taiwan. Keith joins us once again to discuss this. This, of course, follows an interview with Lai Cheng-te, where he labelled Beijing's actions as extremely provocative and, of course, warned that if or once China takes Taiwan, the next would be the Americas, Europe. It was pretty compelling statements. Keith, could I get your thoughts on this statement? Is this Beijing's language genuinely escalation here, or is this just more of the same?
I think it is a bit of both. It's a bit of more of the same. We're always going to have a Taiwan-China issue until it's finally settled. But secondly, the war of words is getting louder, and therefore people need to take note of what is happening in Taiwan. I think that as a result of what is being said, people will observe, they will come to different conclusions as to what is going on. But by and large, I don't see the situation changing rapidly. It's been like this for years and years. China never wants to be seen to be the perpetrator. It wants to remind people that it doesn't go and declare war, doesn't invade, all that kind of stuff. At least not since Tibet.
But Keith, would you say that it's been at this scale before? In your memory, of course, we've seen drills step up severely over the past 2 years or so. The latter end of last year, we had these huge war games around China, if you can remember. And of course, the language has been escalatory, to say the least, on both sides, particularly from Beijing. Every year in his message, Xi Jinping makes comments about reunification. Have things really been on a steady trajectory, or are we on an upward one?
I think it's probably the case that we're an upward one. It's a slow gradient. There's more language around it. There's more activity around the language. So it is getting a little hotter. It's not absolutely hot where it's irretrievable. But in the world when America is not going to listen to China and vice versa, which is the country or the entity that's going to say stop? And that's what we're missing in this lawless world. Some higher authority that's going to be able to step in and say, you really must sit around the conference table.
Keith, do stay with us once again as we turn to our next story. We have further news coming out of Beijing. China has urged the United States to immediately stop interfering in Cuba's affairs. Beijing's foreign ministry said Washington should leave Cuba alone and end what it called pressure and unilateral actions against the island. The remarks come amid rising tensions between the US and Cuba, with China positioning itself as a defender of Havana's sovereignty. Now we move on and over to Eastern Europe, and Russia is preparing to dispatch crude oil and fuel cargoes to Cuba in the near future. The move could provide relief to Cuba as it grapples with a severe fuel shortage, which has triggered power outages and disrupted transport and industrial activity across the island. Cuba has struggled to secure reliable energy supplies amid economic pressures and reduced imports from traditional partners. Moscow's support comes as Russia continues to deepen economic and strategic ties with Havana. Details on the volume and timing of the shipments have not yet been disclosed. Okay, of course, this comes as pressure continues to build on Cuba, with Donald Trump making various statements involving the country, which is 90 miles off of Florida's coast. We'll continue to bring you news on that. We move on now to the Russia-Ukraine conflict, and Russia has launched another massive overnight assault on Ukraine, firing 24 ballistic missiles, 219 drones, and attacking key infrastructure. Ukraine's air defense successfully intercepted a large number of the missiles and drones. Meanwhile, nearly 300,000 people in Odessa have been left without power and water following an attack on a thermal power plant. Russian forces also targeted energy facilities in Odessa with severe damage reported. The town of Kilia is facing the worst conditions, with over 200 buildings losing power, leaving thousands in the cold. Next, we turn to the Indian subcontinent, and the Defence Acquisition Council, chaired by India's Defence Minister Rajnath Singh, has granted acceptance of necessity for major military procurements, including 114 Rafale multi-role fighter aircraft for the IAF and 6 P-8I maritime patrol aircraft for the Navy. This, India's largest defence procurement deal, focuses on Make in India, with 18 flyaway jets and 96 to be built domestically. As per the reports, the deal includes S-400 air defence systems from Russia, Rafale fighter jets from France, with major Make in India push. Scalp long-range missiles with a strong Indian industry participation, P-8I maritime patrol aircraft from the US, and a large-scale procurement under various modernisation heads. China's Foreign Ministry spokesperson Lin Jian called on the Netherlands to resolve internal disputes surrounding chipmaker Nesperia as soon as possible, stressing the need to maintain stability in the global chip supply chain. He blamed the issue on improper administrative intervention by the Dutch government in the operations of companies like Nesperia. Lin also confirmed that China would continue to support its business in protecting their legitimate rights and interests. Well, that's all that we have time for this hour. Keep watching NewsX World for more international news updates.
In the midst of this, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
Hello and welcome. You're watching Trending Tech on NewsX World, where we bring you the latest tech breakthroughs and trends from around the globe. As the entertainment and social media industries rapidly evolve, artificial intelligence technology is taking center stage, reshaping everything from film production to influencer marketing. With major players like Amazon, MGM Studios, Disney, Warner Music and YouTube leading the charge, AI is not only transforming content creation, but also opening new opportunities and challenges across global markets. From virtual influencers to AI-generated music, the impact of these advancements is felt everywhere. They are transforming everything from traditional TV markets to the rise of digital platforms. Today, we take a closer look at the latest developments and their implications for the industry. To discuss this and more, joining us now is Darren Nino Di Stefano, a senior industry consultant in entertainment and social media. He has managed portfolios for major brands and broadcasters working on content and distribution strategies for emerging platforms. Thank you very much for joining us, Darren. It's a pleasure to talk to you.
Thanks for having me.
Let's get straight into this. With Amazon MGM Studios launching a dedicated AI unit for film and TV production. How do you see this impacting content workflows and spending in markets like India's TV sector, which generated $7.4 billion in FY25?
Well, MGM Studios, which is actually owned by Amazon, has recently launched a unit dedicated for AI. The objective is to mainly come up with tools for film and TV production, ultimately to save costs. So this was already seen in House of David, which is one of their TV shows, and they used AI to generate a battle scene, for example. But when it comes to India and the billions made, when it comes to local and original content, it will really get these creatives to assess all parts and phases of the production, whether it's the pre-production side, such as storyboarding, creating virtual sets, to even the virtual, special effects during post. So far, Amazon is seeing efficiencies in reduction of timelines to 20 to 25%. And this is great news for shows that require tight turnaround, for example. As for the mid-sized sort of production houses or the indie producers, this is great in creating those kind of epic scenes that are similar to like Dune or Game of Thrones. And it can now be done at a fraction of the cost.
Wow. And moving on to further news, and of course the Disney $1 billion deal with OpenAI. This licenses over 200 characters from the studio's portfolio, including icons like Mickey Mouse and Frozen. This raises questions on AI-generated content. What opportunities and risks does this present for entertainment giants engaging in global audiences?
Well, they've basically entered into a 3-year agreement with each other. And they are bringing popular characters from Disney's IP to Sora's artificial intelligence video generator by OpenAI, and who are the owners of ChatGPT. Disney want to gain a bit of an oversight, almost forming a committee between these two parties to ensure that their stuff is brand safe. But they also want to do that while harnessing audience interaction, navigating or circumventing through those ethics and IP issues. Risk-wise, it could potentially damage the brand if the content that's being created spreads at a rate that Disney can't control. And we've already seen this with some of the past incidents that happened when it came to Crisis Manager. As far as opportunities go, and for those kind of giant players, entertainment giants like Disney can curate sort of AI videos for their own and operated platforms like Disney Plus, for example. So they can test new stories, they can test new characters, and pass that on as feedback with their content commissioners. And this will now include a layer of like fan-generated content, which can ultimately boost engagement and target, say, younger audiences or global audiences who are savvy on social media.
And moving on once again, Darren, the settlement between Warner Music Group and Suno AI, allowing licensed use of artists' voices and catalogues for generative models in 2026. This opens doors for AI in music creation. How might this influence partnerships and revenue streams in media or marketing agencies?
Well, Warner Music seemed to have come to a settlement with Suno AI, which was once a lawsuit late last year and has now become more of a partnership or a strategic, venture. So the Suno platform, for those who don't know, is primarily used for music creation, where users can create AI music. And Suno, as now with this platform, now get access to the record label's catalog. So these includes artists like Ed Sheeran, Bruno Mars, Charlie XCX. So media marketing agencies could potentially partner with the AI platforms directly for enterprise solutions, as opposed to the traditional route, which is going to the record labels when licensing commercialized tracks, for example. This is definitely a big win for agencies, like gaining access to cheaper content that sounds similar to those artists, and they are potentially royalty free.
There are AI native socials like Meta, Vibes, and OpenAI Sora is reshaping these social networking platforms. As a senior growth director with a track record in social marketing, what strategies would you recommend for products and brands in order to stay relevant and survive?
Well, AI social networks are growing on the rise, putting pressure for traditional players like Meta, who owns Facebook and WhatsApp. And as you can see, it has resulted to Meta creating Vibes. And this is no shock to Meta, as they once created Threads to rival X when Elon Musk took over. And with these kind of new platforms, the kind of point of difference will vary on whether it's the feature, the functionality, or the overall purpose. So it kind of varies platform to platform. Some of them are focusing on the generative feed aspects, while others might prioritize image sharing as their value proposition to rival traditional apps. When it comes to brands and products, they will have a social playbook which will operates as their brand Bible, and it's to determine the right strategy and format for social media. So they just need to make sure that the playbooks are updated, and are they targeting the right audience and the right platform, whether it's the current ones or the new ones. This also presents an opportunity for servicing markets like Korea and India, and they're heavily reliant on local specialty social networking platforms as well.
Yes, and Darren, virtual or AI influencers like Grammy Spills and Lil Maquila continually become a growing trend on social media, sparking viral fascination, but also skepticism around authenticity and brand deals. So far, does this insight align with your forecast and predictions in influencer marketing campaigns, particularly impacting real human creators and their income streams?
Well, there are influencers now on social media, and they are so realistic, and they're actually made with AI. So Granny Spills has exploded on TikTok with 400,000 and 1 million Instagram followers, and that's just within weeks. Little Michaela, which when I was working once for a social media agency, we actually did a partnership with her because she was one of the early pioneers, and she's kind of being consistent with 2.5 million followers on Instagram. Brand deals that she's done so far has been brands like Prada and Dior, so they're quite realistic and they're definitely happening. And she has been reportedly to be earning $73,000 per post, so that's pretty crazy. While it's inevitable, it has been kind of a trend that's that has people that everyone has been predicting, and it is kind of slowly on the rise. But I think it's human creators are the ones that would probably hold most of the marketing budget or the social media sort of advertising spend. So they still kind of hold the chunk of it. Where the pressure might happen is it might put pressure with nano or micro influencers who are pretty much on the lower tier when it comes to income earning. And it will primarily be due to cost. So it'll probably be them who might be impacted versus the displacement of the topper talent.
And finally, YouTube's recent 2026 vision was announced by CEO Neil Mohan. It emphasizes AI tools being the key focus, blurring the lines between AI and user-generated assets. Whether you're a global production house or an aspiring creator, what are some of the best practices in managing change driven by AI, particularly in content production and creative workflows?
Yeah, so the CEO of YouTube recently made an announcement as part of their all hands, sharing their priorities in 2026. And the focus will be on AI tools, whether it's for creativity and content discovery. And this will allow creators to gain access to new features or faster production and recommendation sort of tactics. With Meta and TikTok aggressively pushing AI on their platforms, YouTube are desperately trying hard to reposition themselves as innovators in this space. And the key is for creators and producers to really treat AI as a new sort of production capability with clear accountability and what are those measurable outcomes. So best is to kind of handpick campaigns or production assets that's going to be core to your editorial content strategy and see how that might be impacted. So it's assessing those kind of new features once they get onboarded, and maybe select sort of assets that you think you can take a bit more of a creative risk and use and maximize and really value the AI features and see how it would operate using a test and learn environment, and it could be something that you can pioneer as well.
Darren Nino Di Stefano, thank you so much for joining us here on this episode of Trending Tech. Pleasure to have you.
Thanks.
With that, it's a wrap on this episode of Trending Tech. For more tech updates and innovations, stay tuned on NewsX World.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
UN Security Council needs a makeover, a comprehensive reform, and India deserves a position there, a role there.
Prime Minister Modi during Operation Sindoor made it amply clear that war has never been India's choice. We are with the side of peace. We are neither neutral nor indifferent. We are with peace.
We would have dealt with the US a whole lot on trade and those kinds of things, and that's not as certain these days. So we have to go back and look at our European partners, our Asian partners.
An opportunity to exchange, to have a dialogue, to have a debate on a different perspective on finding the solution of the conflict.
First thing that is important to have a common ground, and that we do have with humanitarian laws and human rights, but also to say, okay, what does it mean for us as a country to act on these laws and how can we work together?
When we realize that there's something wrong with democracy, the institutions and policies, values come together and we take stock, and it's possible then to improve and chart a new course for democracy.
It's the people's right to self-determination, and if they want to be independent, they should be independent. We will not start a war against Greenland.
Hello and welcome to Deep Dive on NewsX World. I'm Kriti Mehta. We're diving now into the US-India trade deal and the quiet revisions made in February 2026. These changes, though subtle, are significant. The White House updated the fact sheet, shifting key aspects of the deal. Pulse's tariffs are removed and a stronger focus on digital services. What do these changes mean for India and its citizens? Before breaking that down, let's rewind a bit and understand the context. In February, Prime Minister Modi and President Donald Trump set an ambitious target to double US-India trade to $500 billion by 2030. But tension quickly escalated, starting with the US tariffs on Indian goods. Fast forward now to April of last year, when the US slapped a 26% import duty on Indian goods, igniting trade disputes. Then by June of last year, Indian officials were working hard to bridge differences leading up to the July deadline. But the stakes got even higher in August 2025 when the US imposed a 25% tariff, citing India's Russian oil purchases, bringing the total tariff to 50%. But things began to change in January 2026 when Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal assured that India was working to close the deal quickly. And in February 2026, India and the US reached an agreement to reduce reciprocal tariffs from 25% to 18%, which was a key win for India. Now, the White House released a fact sheet outlining the terms of this interim trade agreement. And then within days, it quietly revised the language without public notice. Now, here's what's changed. Take a look at your screens. A removal of certain pulses. The earlier fact sheets list of US food and agricultural products that India would reduce or eliminate tariffs on included certain pulses, but the revised version has deleted those words entirely. Now, softening of purchase language. The phrase saying India commits to buying more than $500 billion worth of US products was also changed to say India intends to buy them. Reordered product list. While pulses were removed, the best of a list still references other products like dried distillers grains, red sorghum, tree nuts, fresh and processed fruit, soybean oil, wine and spirits. Now, these seem like small edits, but they signal big shifts. Let's unpack why this actually matters. Now, India is the largest producer and consumer of pulses in the world. Pulses are a staple in Indian diets and a major source of protein for millions of households. The original fact sheet language implied tariff cuts on pulses, which would have undercut domestic farmers and raised prices for consumers. After pushback, the US deleted that reference, acknowledging India's sensitivities. Meanwhile, changing commits to intends puts the lofty $500 billion trade target more in the realm of aspiration than obligation. It softens expectations for guaranteed US exports to India. Now compare this to February 2 of this year and the deal that was struck then. That earlier deal was framed as a reciprocal tariff reduction. India welcomed relief from punitive duties. The US touted market access. But this latest revision shows the US shaping the narrative after the fact, removing references that could be politically sensitive in India and tweaking language to suit Washington's messaging priorities. So what does this all mean for ordinary Indians? Farmers get some reassurance that pulses won't become unilateral concessions in a global trade pact. Consumers may avoid domestic price pressure on key staples. But broader trade ambitions, the $500 billion target, now read more like a future objective than a binding roadmap. The developments are a reminder. Trade deals aren't just about economics on paper. They're a battleground of language, politics, and national priorities. Joining me now for this discussion is Dr. Ajay Dua. He's former Indian Secretary of Commerce and senior economist. Dr. Dua, thank you very much for joining us in this discussion at NewsX World's Deep Dive. It's a pleasure to have you.
My pleasure.
So let's then begin. Dr. Dua, the White House has quietly diluted key promises, removing pulses and softening the $500 billion target. Is it really a diplomatic win for India, or is there an ulterior motive for the US here?
I wouldn't say that there is ulterior motive. After all, we are entering into a trade deal, and both sides will do their best to protect their interests. If it applies to India, where we have a large farmer population, it also applies to the US because it does have also an issue of its farmers produce. They're not being able to sell that to China because of this tariff war between them and the political leadership there, which faces a midterm election in a few months' time, obviously is concerned about its voters. So I wouldn't call it ulterior motive in any sense when we are doing a business transaction. The US heard that through their representatives in India, that particularly an ambassador who's got his ears down to the ground, new ambassador, and who has access to the Prime President direct access, that there is a muttering going on in India, which was earlier silent, but in the last 2 or 3 days it had become pronounced, that the Indian farmers are going to be hurt, that the government has opened up in the declaration, the joint statement issued 5 days ago, that there is going to be India is going to be allowing certain agriculture projects to come up, and that how the progress is made in the what has been agreed to in the joint statement, upon that would depend whether the US will be when the US will be bringing down its duties from the existing 50% to 20%. So having been said that and conveyed to the US administration, I think they've done well to have addressed one issue out of agriculture, that is pulses, that India would be reducing the duty on pulses to zero, which would have given access to the US production of pulses. We might be large producers, but we might be large consumers in dals, obviously various kinds. It's a staple food for us in India. So there the US has relented and removed out of the items in which it was expecting India to kind of give them market access, pulses has been removed. Similarly, there was concern in India that $500 billion worth of additional goods to be imported by India from the US in the course. Earlier, there was no timeline in the first draft. In the second, they've said it's over 5 years, which was also considerable considering that as of now, we export to the US only about 50 to 55 billion worth of goods. So doubling it up for every year, meaning every year it had to be 100 from the current 50, was also, people were wondering what items would it be. We were being reluctant to talk about specifics, but the undertone has been very clear that India, and has stated it now, is no longer an undertone since the Foreign Secretary, Mr. Mishri, yesterday said that India feels that no one can subject it to buying oil from where it considers its national interests served. That means the US cannot be insisting upon India to turn off the tap to Russia, from where we've been buying discounted oil for the last 3.5 years, ever since the sanctions were imposed. So now to say that they have relaxed it by saying, instead of India committing, saying India intends to do.
Yeah.
That would follow. So there's a dilution in the language, both in terms of legalistic as well as the commonly understood. But having said all that, I would say that this opens up a bit of a door, that if you negotiate hard, it is possible to get the USA to revise what it is offering, which is both good as well as bad, because it makes the whole thing unpredictable. Saying what is the final say of President Trump in these matters, if either on his own, or if we he senses the public opinion, or diplomatically the issue is taken up, that he comes down. And do you remember there was a term used for President Trump as soon as he had come, taco, Trump always chickens out. That was a very wrong one, but this is what it is referring to, saying initially you impose large duties, take a particular stand, and probably you do that in a hurry, but soon thereafter, once you see the responses and the reactions, then you come down. So
Dr. Duan, policies are also central to India's food security, and millions of farmers' livelihoods depend on it. By taking them off the tariff list, has India really protected a critical sector here?
We have taken our step. I think a little more needs to be done. Like you yourself mentioned, that what we are talking about, the sorghum animal feed, which is also what we had been objecting to earlier, saying that the animals which have been fed on non-vegetarian food, that India has certain reservations about that, are importing their products to India. Similarly, India had reservation about genetically modified seeds, but we have said that we will be importing more of oil from the US, edible oil, and that in that soya oil is what we are talking about. In that also it is genetically produced. So an outlet here. Gone about agriculture opening up a little more slowly. Sometime or the other we have to open up. I am not at all trying to be protective of any sector in the Indian economy, including the farmers. They have to be more productive. They have to have modern science, technology, etc. But given the fact that we are not able to provide jobs for rural people in the urban sector, because we have a highly populated country, so the process of shifting migration has slowed down, and 60% which remains in the rural areas have to be found jobs in the rural area. Farming are the main activities, so our restrain upon ourselves is gradually we will do that. We take the message, we will open, say, fruits, nuts, tree nuts and spirits. What we have done with the European Union, I think, is a little more, I wouldn't call it sensible. There's nothing sensible in trade talks. It is each side for its best, as I said. Though what I am saying is that what we agreed to with the European Union and earlier with the UK could have been the amount of opening which we would have done in giving market access on Indian agriculture, and provided for it, saying over a slightly longer time, we would be reducing the duties, and by a particular year, maybe 5 years from now, 7 years from now, that we would have brought these down to zero. So you are preparing the Indian farmers as well, saying it's not going to be like before. You guys have to become competitive, and there would be pressure upon the industrial sector, Indian policy makers.
Doctor, also the fact that just wordings have been changed, commits to intents, does it lower accountability, and is the US really backing away from firm obligations?
I would say we should welcome it, even if the word US is backing it out. We should not rub it in.
Do you see it becoming an economic reality anytime soon?
I think so. They have realized political more than political. It is economic necessity, saying India is growing at 7% plus. Today it might be a $4 trillion economy, but it's going to be growing faster than China and other countries, which is true. So economically, they would like to have access to India's population, which is growing, unlike China's, which is falling, and we are growing faster. We account for 17% of the world's economic growth. The only country ahead of us is 26% USA, because its economy is 4 times, or not 4, 8 times, 6 times, 24 billion, ours 4, 6 times our economy. So their 3% adds up to much more, because they are already 6 times. But they would want to have an access, have a foot in the door to India, our country which is doing well. So to that extent, I think it is an economic decision by the US, which would like to cultivate India, and for us, US is a very important market.
Right. And finally, Dr. Dua, what do you have to say about the fact that these editings were quietly made behind, behind the scenes, editing in the fact sheet, the language of the deal, instead of making a public announcement about it? How is one to view that?
I think we should give the devil its due. The Indian diplomats, trade diplomats, as well as the Foreign Office, have been working on it for the last days, ever since the USA's first draft came. In the last 9 days or so, we've seen first President Trump's unilateral declaration, then thereafter a joint statement, and this the fact sheet which is issued today, that none of these is a result of quiet action by one side. The Indian side has been working on them quietly. That's the way to go, rather than shouting at them or saying that we have been done in, etc. Then people take polarized stand, get polarized the issue. Then they start taking hard stands. But if you do negotiations behind the scenes, then there is a greater chance of mutual understanding, and I think that is what is achieved the results, and I think that's the way to go forward. We must have a deal with the US. Which deal? Not the interim. We are right now talking about this is interim. The trade pact will, once the non-tariff barriers, as well as the plan to go forward, will be mentioned, of the kind which we have done with the UK, we have done with 3 or 4 other countries. Then there is certainty. But while we are still in the work, is in the works. I think working behind the scene and listening to one another, accommodating one another to the extent possible is the way forward.
Right. Dr. Dua, thanks then very much for joining us in this conversation here at Deep Dive.
My pleasure.
And viewers, with that, we wrap up this episode of NewsX World's Deep Dive. Stay tuned for all international news and updates.
Hello and welcome. I'm Suma Katauka and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines of this hour. Long lines form as Bangladeshis begin voting in a high-stakes election following the 2024 ouster of longtime Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. Counting starts this evening with results expected by Friday as a referendum runs in parallel and the main contest pits BNP against a Jamaat-led coalition. Police say an 18-year-old woman killed her mother and a stepbrother before opening fire at her former school in Tumbler Bridge, British Columbia. Canada, 9 people, including the suspect who died by suicide, are dead in one of Canada's deadliest mass shootings. The motive is still unknown. Russia fires drones and ballistic missiles across Ukraine overnight, targeting energy systems and injuring at least 7 people in Kyiv, Dnipro, and Odessa. Ukrainian officials say hundreds of weapons disrupt power, heating, and water as a massive attack hits buildings in the capital. President Donald Trump says talks with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu produced no definitive agreement in Iran. Netanyahu says Israel's security must be protected and signals no clear U.S. commitment to expand talks beyond Iran's nuclear program. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says Israel joins President Donald Trump's Board of Peace during talks in Washington. Images show Netanyahu signing the accession document after meeting Secretary of State Marco Rubio, confirming Israel's membership. An advisor to Iran's supreme leader says Tehran will not compromise on its missile capabilities amid ongoing talks with the United States. Ali Shamkhani calls the missile program non-negotiable during events marking the anniversary of the Islamic Revolution. Palestinian protesters rally in Melbourne on the final day of Israeli President Isaac Herzog's visit after clashes in Sydney and demonstrations in Canberra. Protesters unite across the country as Prime Minister Anthony Albanese hosts the visit following a deadly Sydney shooting. The U.S. House votes 219 to 211 to reject President Donald Trump's tariffs on Canadian goods, with 6 Republicans joining Democrats in a rare rebuke. The measure now moves to the Senate but faces a likely presidential veto if it reaches the White House. Now for this hour, we start with the breaking news coming in from Bangladesh Army. Bangladesh Army has conducted a lathi charge at a polling station in Brahmanbaria. The incident was reported after complaints of both capturing emerged from the location. Security personnel moved to disperse the crowd and restore order at the polling center. Local sources say voting was temporarily disrupted following the clash. Election officials have yet to issue a detailed statement on the incident. Authorities say the situation is now under control as investigations continue. Now for this, we welcome Ms. Sukriti Kumar Mandal, a Bangladeshi politician. He joins us from Minority Janata Party of Dhaka. Thank you very much, Mr. Mandal, for joining us. Welcome to NewsX World. Mr. Mandal, what is the situation like in Bangladesh? Is this a common thing that happens during voting in Bangladesh? How do you analyze the current situation of among the voters, among the polling stations and in Bangladesh right now?
I think, you know, this is 13th general election. 13th general election going on. Already 12 generation gone. Now the situation is, you know, only our another large political party now out of the participation. So the thing is, we thought, I think below 50% vote will be counted. But I visited my various center also. Now the scenario is what I have seen. 60% plus, 60 to 70% vote will be counted here. I am now in Zoshor area, Zoshor district. So there is no problem here. Everybody is going there, participating. Hindu, Muslim, everyone.
Nice.
So the thing is, until now, everything is okay. As I have seen, I did not visit everywhere, but as I have seen,
yes,
the system is okay as a general election.
So, okay. Mr. Mandal, do you think this move by Bangladeshi police in polling station, do you think this has discouraged anyone to join the polling, or what do you think this move? Do you think this was necessary there?
I think you are mentioning the police is discouraging. No, this is the rumor. This is the disinformation, misinformation. Police is totally neutral. Police is totally neutral. Here, 7 to 8 lakhs law enforcement agency, including our military also is there. 1 lakh above military is just roaming. They are the staging force. They are not possessing the magistracy power also. So, as a general election, you know, the only one day, 12 crore 76 lakhs voters are in there. One day, it's very tough. It's very tough. But in Bangladesh, that is happening. This is the history.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Sukriti Kumar Mandal, for joining us from Bangladesh and sharing that on-time insight about Bangladesh. We would also like to welcome retired Major General Gigi Dwivedi. He's a war veteran and also Professor of International Relations and Strategic Studies. He joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Major General Dwivedi, for joining us again. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now, looking at Bangladesh, you know, the breaking news that has come in, how do you analyze the situation of, you know, of the voters, and do you think this could have discouraged voters somehow? And also, do you think this was necessary for the police to do such?
Well, the point is, Suma, it's a very delicate situation and a very sensitive issue, because when the voting is taking place, the certain amount of instances are quite expected, because, you know, all the people who are participating, more than that, the ones who are contesting elections, for them the stakes are very high. So there are two elements one who are directly involved, contesting elections, those who are representative of various parties, those who are manning the booths, they are the one part. And second is the general public who are voting. But I can understand why the security is quite tight and all precautions have been taken. But please remember the background. First and foremost, there have been number of instances against the minorities. So minorities have that fear that in case they go to vote, will they be secure? Because first and foremost, person is worried about own security. And then you go and cast the vote. And secondly, the minorities like Hindus, they have been traditionally supporting the Awami League. And now Awami League is actually banned from voting. So they directly don't know whom they will be voting for. And in case they go on to cast their vote, will they be safe? So that is a major issue. But these instances definitely have negative impact because, one of the BNP contestant has actually met a fatal casualty. And but at the same time, I think one has to take the overview. Overview, it appears the elections so far are going peacefully, but certain instances would take place, are quite expected, but it is very difficult to exactly see what is the mood of general public, especially the minorities, because they are the ones who are very vulnerable. Asuma.
With that, I'd like to thank Major General Dwivedi for joining us and sharing that insight. Please stay with us as we come back to you for our next discussion as well. Now, moving on to UK, Britain has pledged hundreds of millions of dollars in new air defenses for Ukraine as Russia's war approaches its fifth year. The UK Defense Ministry says around $200 million will go towards a NATO scheme backed by US President Donald Trump to purchase American weapons for Kyiv. London will also supply 1,000 British-made lightweight missiles worth more than $500 million. Defense Secretary John Healey says allies are more committed than ever to supporting Ukraine. The announcement comes as NATO defense ministers meet in Brussels to discuss increasing military aid. Russia's continued strikes on Ukraine's energy grid have caused widespread power and heating cuts during freezing winter conditions there. Germany's Defense Minister Boris Pistorius has called the attacks terrorism against civilians and said support for Ukraine's self-defense must be ramped up. Now we welcome back retired Major General Gigi Dwivedi. He joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Major General, for staying with us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, as you know, we see statements, these kind of statements coming in from Europe and European allies of Ukraine. And we have seen a lot this week especially. But do you think that West has already been sidelined in the discussion, and also do you think they have limited capability for supply or supporting Ukraine further?
Well, Asuma, the point is that in this whole peace process between Ukraine and Russia, definitely West have been sidelined, and they really are not on the table. But at the same time, West has obligation to support Ukraine because as far as US is concerned, that they have said that the European nations, the NATO, need to also make contribution. It is not the sole responsibility of US. So therefore, as per the NATO scheme, the countries are coming together. And as you rightly said, that all countries are contributing about $200 million as a central kitty to support Ukraine, acquisition of weapon systems. And Britain has promised $500 million in aid supply of the air defense systems, that is the short-range missile. The point is, Asuma, it has to be realized that Putin is not in favor or not inclined to call off the war. It is now going to be 4 years as of 24th February, because it started on 24th February 2022. And despite President Trump's efforts to call the war off, and he has promised that he will do it in matter of hours or days, it has not actually happened after almost a year plus now that President Trump is in office. So what are the Ukraine's options? What are the NATO's options? Option is to fight on. And therefore, currently what is going on is the aerial warfare. because Russia is pounding the Ukraine cities and other infrastructure with the missiles, with the drones. So therefore, most critical fighting defense weapon today for Ukraine is the air defense. And therefore, these missiles, they are Raven or Greyhawk. These missiles are the ones which are versatile. They can be fired from different modes, and they have the all-weather, means they can be fired at night capability. So I think what Europe and Great Britain or even NATO is doing is that they have to go along. And even if the US support is limited, but they have to do the heavy lifting now. And in fact, it was promised in the last meeting at Brussels that they will be contributing something to the tune of $800 billion to the defense of Ukraine. So I think if President Putin doesn't want to end the war, then Ukraine has no choice to fight the war, and NATO and European countries have no choice but to give right weapons and equipment and support to Ukraine to fight it on. Asuma.
Thank you for highlighting that, Major General. Please stay with us as we come back to you for our next discussion as well. Moving on to India, the Defense Acquisition Council, chaired by India's Defense Minister Rajnath Singh, has granted acceptance of necessary for major military procurements, including 114 Rafale multi-role fighter aircraft for the IAF and 6 P-8I maritime patrol aircraft for the Navy. This is India's largest defense procurement deal, focuses on Make in India, with 18 flyaway jets and 96 to be built domestically. As per the reports, the deal includes S-400 air defense systems from Russia, Rafale fighter jets from France with major Make in India push, Scalp long-range missiles with strong Indian industry participation, P-8I maritime patrol aircraft from the US, and a large-scale procurement under various modernization heads. Now for this, we welcome back retired Major General G.G. Dwivedi. He's a war veteran and Professor of International Relations and Strategic Studies, joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Major General, for staying with us. Thank you. But can you tell us the timing of these procurement? Do you think this was on the making for a long time? And also, how important are these to have the Make in India aspect in them, and how significant is that?
Well, Suma, the acquisition of the fighter jet aircraft has been long due. In fact, if you go back by about a decade, in 2015, India had floated request for the acquisition of 114 fighter aircraft. But the point was suddenly the current government cancelled the deal and went in for 36 Rafales from France as government-to-government deal. And as of today, India's fighter aircraft strength is barely 30 squadrons, whereas the minimal requirement is about 42. And in fact, if you evaluate or if you factor the current threat scenario, this requirement would be as high as about 60 squadrons. So I think there was no choice for the government of India now to fast forward this deal because of the criticality of the numbers of the squadrons that we have today. Now, the Rafale was the natural choice. Why? Because we already had purchased or acquired 36 Rafales a couple of years back. I mean, in fact, they are fully operational. That counts to 2 squadrons. And also, we have negotiated for another 26 marine version of the Rafales, which will be on the aircraft carriers. So, therefore, to ensure that we don't diversify our inventory, and please remember, the Rafale is a tried-out aircraft, especially during Operation Sindoor. Last May, it took a heavy toll of the Pakistani air bases and also the terrorist infrastructure. So I think the deal has come, though has come late, but there are a couple of issues that are involved with this deal. These 114 aircraft, 18 will be acquired in the flyaway condition, means they will be just bought off the shelf, and remainder 86 will be manufactured in India over a period of next 5 to 7 years. And there also, India's current policy is self-reliance. So therefore, to start with, 30% of the components will be sourced from Indian industry, and later on it will go up to right up to 60. But the whole process is going to take about 7 to 8 years by the time these 114 aircraft are fully integrated into the Indian defense system. And as far as the S-400 is concerned, India had bought three batteries of these S-400. Two were still in the pipeline, which actually are yet to arrive. And also these PI marine surveillance aircraft, India has about 14 of them, and 6 more are required because keep in view the sensitivity of the Indian Ocean region, the threat from the seaboard. So these all are now being fast forwarded. And the last point which I want to make is that India needs to actually also go into a 5th generation aircraft. The AMCA, which is the aircraft that India is working on, is going to take a decade's time. And China today has a 300 5th generation aircraft, that is, and they have J-20. They also have manufacturing J-35. Couple of their squadron will be given to Pakistan. And China has also developed the H-20 stealth bomber, and possibly 6th generation aircraft is also in the making. So this time that India needs to actually fast track is defense preparation, keep in view the threat perception. And I think this deal of the FAL 114 aircraft has come through, though a little late, but I think still it has come through. It will definitely contribute hugely to India's defense capability. Asuma.
With that, I would like to thank Major General Gigi Dividi for joining us and sharing that in-depth analysis and insight with us on NewsX World. Thank you very much. Now moving on to fashion giant Hermes. Hermes chief executive Axel Dumas says he briefly met Jeffrey Epstein in 2013 after the convicted sex offender joined a private workshop visit uninvited. Dumas says Epstein was not on the guest list and attached himself to a group invited by filmmaker Woody Allen and his wife during a visit to Hermes' workshop outside Paris. A photo released in newly unsealed U.S. Justice Department files shows Dumas, Epstein, and Allen together at the event. Dumas says the picture was taken spontaneously and that Epstein later tried to arrange the 3 meetings with him, all of which he declined. He added that Epstein already had a bad reputation at the time. Now we welcome Ms. Alison Mutler. She's a former AP Bureau Chief, joins us live from Bucharest. Thank you very much, Ms. Mutler, for joining us again.
Hello, Asuma.
Hi. Now, this Hermes chief is saying this now, but do you think that he genuinely is saying this, he means this, and also, do you think he could have, told Jeffrey Epstein to leave the workshop because he wasn't in the guest list?
No, what I think is, unlike other people who've been snared in these Epstein files, is this Hermes person is a little bit more intelligent or less corruptible, in the sense that it's clear that sort of Epstein, from what we're hearing, kind of sneaked his way onto this list. And what is interesting is Hermes saying that he knew he had the bad reputation, which is all the other people who said we had no idea he had a bad reputation, and once we found out, we distanced ourselves from him, we broke off our relations. So what seems to be consistent is there's always a photo. And the photos are taken in order to be used for blackmail. It happens that this blackmail, or to damage somebody's reputation, in this case it's happened after Epstein's death and with this file dump. What I think is he wasn't particularly happy, but of course from what he's saying at least, but what we know now is that he snuck onto the guest list. He wasn't particularly happy, and this picture was taken. He doesn't look like he was happy, but that's the kind of picture that espionage do. They use that picture as evidence to be used against the person later. But what is clear is, from what he's saying, is 3 times Epstein tried to contact him and arrange a meeting, and he declined. And he, at least from what he's saying, he does not seem to have been happy that Epstein was there, not necessarily knowing everything about him, although it was, I think, did you say 2013? So he'd already been convicted for some trafficking offences. So he wasn't happy about it. And then And for that reason, he was cautious enough not to have any further meetings. He did not need, he had a great job, a great position. He did not need any connection with Epstein. We know already that Woody Allen did have his connections. They're both from New York. They were both Jewish. Woody Allen himself has had some, allegations of sexual misdemeanors against him. They had more in common. But probably Epstein said to Woody Allen, "Oh, get me in here. This is another link a relationship I'd like to forge." But it seems that Hermes here was quite smart, that he kept him at a distance. He managed to sort of trick himself to be at that meeting, but afterwards he made sure that relationship did not develop.
Yes. Thank you very much, Ms. Matlar, for sharing that insight with us. Please stay with us as we come back to you. Now we move the focus on to North America. Residents of Tumbler Ridge, British Columbia, in Canada have gathered to mourn the death of 8 victims who were killed in a tragic shooting at the local high school yesterday. The 18-year-old suspect, who had dropped out of the school years ago and struggled with mental health issues, killed 5 children, including her 11-year-old stepbrother. Among the wounded is a 12-year-old girl who is still fighting for her life. The tight-knit community lit candles, comforted each other, and shared their grief. They stood together, remembering the lives lost and beginning the painful journey of healing. Now we welcome back Ms. Alison Matlar. She joins us live from Bucharest. Thank you very much, Ms. Matlar, for staying with us. Now, this heartbreaking news, we still don't know the motives, and so much of it is still covered. How do you think Canada also needs to update their gun policies? As it seems like they hadn't done so in a while, as they'd never really had this many or school shootings as often as US, which is right next to them.
Of course, they'd always assumed they were safe. That's what happens in cases like this. They hadn't really had any school shootings. That was something that happened in the United States, where it's enshrined the right to bear arms, and that is something that has been the case in the United States for a long time. Carrying a weapon is quite normal, whereas Canada is a more peaceful, if you like, country, and shootings were not known. And so it was probably easy for this troubled youngster to get hold of a gun. And as you said, he had some mental issues, and he went on a shooting spree. I mean, nowadays there's so much access to what happens in these shooting sprees and the news about them, that there are these copycat examples, and troubled youngsters or people in general get inspired by other cases that have happened. And if they can easily access a weapon, then it could happen. He seems like kind of tragic person, and it is obviously torn Canada apart. It shocked the nation. These things don't happen in Canada, but particularly because he also killed his stepbrother, and I understand he also killed his mother as well. And as you said, there was a young girl, 12-year-old girl, who's still fighting for her life. But it will raise questions about what the legislation is. How easy is it for a young person, or how easy is it for anyone in Canada to get legal access to firearms? And I think for sure Canada will be taking a long look at this and deciding how to move forward, so this tragic case is not repeated.
Yes, indeed. With that, I'd like to thank Ms. Matlar for joining us today and sharing that insight with us on NewsX World. Thank you very much. We have a breaking news. A drone strike has targeted the Lukoil Ukhta oil refinery in Russia's Komi Republic, setting it ablaze. The refinery, located over 2,000 kilometers from the Ukrainian border, was struck by a drone, causing significant damage. Authorities have issued an early morning warning about the drone attack, which also affected the neighboring cities. Residents were told to stay indoors for safety. Ukhta is a major center for Russia's oil and gas industry, with oil pipelines running through the city from the Nenets region and gas pipelines connected from the Yamal Peninsula, making it an important energy hub. Now we move on to our next news. The search for missing Nancy Guthrie, mother of U.S. news anchor Savannah Guthrie, has entered its 11th day with no major breakthroughs. Authorities are closely examining new evidence, including photos and video footage of a masked individual at her home in Tucson, Arizona. On the night of her disappearance, the FBI has released these images showing the suspect tampering with the door camera. Meanwhile, authorities continue to investigate a series of ransom notes and the possibility that Guthrie's health is in a serious jeopardy. The FBI is offering a $50,000 reward for any information that could help solve this case. Now we move on to EU-China. China has announced it will be reducing tariffs on certain EU dairy products starting on Friday, but will continue to impose anti-subsidy duties of up to 11.7% for the next 5 years. This follows an investigation that concluded certain EU dairy products were subsidized, harming China's domestic dairy industry. The European Union's dairy exports to China had previously been subjected to temporary tariffs ranging from 21.9% to 42.7% since December. The move aims to protect local industries while maintaining some access for EU dairy goods. China's Ministry of Commerce has emphasized that the new duties are in response to unfair trade practices that has affected Chinese producers. Despite the reduction in overall tariff rates, the anti-subsidy measures remain a significant barrier, with many EU exporters concerned about the long-term impact on market access. Now we move on to U.S. The city of Seattle has agreed to pay $29 million to the family of Jahnavi Kandula, a 23-year-old Indian graduate student who was killed by a speeding police vehicle in 2023. Kandula was struck by Officer Kevin Dave, who was driving up to 119 kilometers per hour in a 40-kilometer zone while responding to a call. She later died from her injuries. About $20 million of the settlement will be covered by the city's insurance. The case has sparked international outrage after body camera footage showed another officer joking that Kandula's life had limited value. He was later fired and is suing for wrongful termination. Officer Dave was also dismissed. He was fined for negligent driving, but prosecutors declined to file felony charges. City officials say the settlement brings partial closure to the family of Kandula. That's all we have time for. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.
In the midst of this, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
Hello and welcome. I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top headlines of this hour. Police say an 18-year-old woman killed her mother and stepbrother before opening fire at her former school in Tumbler Ridge, British Columbia. 9 people, including the suspect who died by suicide, are dead in one of Canada's deadliest mass shootings. The motive is unknown. Nearly 127 million voters head to the polls in Bangladesh, a key test of democracy after Sheikh Hasina was ousted in a 2024 student uprising. The race pits the BNP against Jazmat-e-Islami-led coalition as voters also decide on a new national charter. President Donald Trump says talks with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu produced no definitive agreement on Iran. Netanyahu says Israel's security must be protected and signals no clear US commitment to expand talks beyond Iran's nuclear program. An advisor to Iran's supreme leader says Tehran will not compromise on its missile capabilities amid ongoing talks with the United States. Ali Khani calls the missile program non-negotiable during events marking the anniversary of the Islamic Revolution. Pro-Palestinian protesters rally in Melbourne on the final day of Israeli President Isaac Herzog's visit after clashes in Sydney and demonstrations in Canberra. Protesters unite across the country as Prime Minister Anthony Albanese hosts the visit following a deadly Sydney shooting. Ukrainian officials say Kyiv is under a massive Russian missile attack with explosions reported and buildings hit across the capital. Emergency teams are deployed and no casualties are so far confirmed. Elsewhere, Ukrainian officials say Russian strikes kill 4 civilians in 3 villages in the Dnipropetrovsk region. The governor says multiple people are wounded in the attacks, including a woman and a man whose wife is also killed. The US House votes 219 to 211 to reject Donald Trump's tariffs on Canadian goods, with 6 Republicans joining Democrats in a rare rebuke. The measure now moves to the Senate but faces a likely presidential veto if it reaches the White House. Those are the top headlines for the hour, but we start in the United States, and US Attorney General Pam Bondi faced a fiery congressional hearing defending the Justice Department's handling of the Jeffrey Epstein files. Lawmakers accused the Justice Department of failing to properly redact names, even releasing explicit images of survivors. Bondi apologized for the abuse they suffered, but rejected claims of misconduct, saying any errors were corrected immediately. Republicans also pressed her on redactions of names not legally protected. Congressman Thomas Massie called the issue bigger than Watergate and demanded accountability. Lawmakers questioned references to Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, formerly Prince Andrew, in the files. Bondi said past prosecutors should answer why no changes were filed. She was also challenged over federal agents fatally shooting 2 people in Minneapolis earlier this year. Bondi defended the administration's actions and its immigration crackdown. Joining us to discuss this hearing is Ross Feingold, a political analyst. He joins us live from Taipei in Taiwan. Ross, thank you first of all very much for joining us. Pam Bondi seemingly seemed rattled by this congressional hearing. The voices were raised multiple times.